Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 11, Master Mason, of Freemasonry Its Hidden Meaning by George H. Steinmetz. Chapter 10, Master Mason. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them, while the sun, or the light, or the moon, or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets, when the sounds of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low, also when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fears shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail, because men goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets, or ever the silver cord be loosened, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. Ecclesiastes 13:1-7. The inner apprentice degree, dealing with the material, is preparatory. That of the fellow craft is cyclical, away from the material, towards the spiritual. The degree of Master Mason, if the assumption that Master stems from the mysteries is correct, is the summit, wholly spiritual, interrogation as to personal desire. Preparation and worthiness is repeated. For a second time, the necessity for proficiency in the preceding degree is emphasized. Patience is still a virtue. The spiritual is not forced upon any individual. One must reach a level where he is cognizant of it and, of his own volition, seek it. In the third degree, the candidate approaches the spiritual. He is to make of himself the complete man, the master. He includes the physical, the cyclical, and the spiritual. The process is symbolized by the preparation, which includes that of both preceding degrees. Demanding proficiency in the preceding degrees is not an arbitrary ruling of the lodge. It is for the candidate's personal benefit. He who has not learned the lessons of the physical and cyclical degrees has not attained a level where he can hope to achieve understanding of the spiritual. Knowing the true symbology of the compasses, a more noble and glorious explication than the rational explanation given in the lodge is apparent. The compasses are emblematic of the spiritual. Therefore, on his first admission into a lodge of Master Masons, the candidate is confronted with the fact that he has entered upon the spiritual degree of Freemasonry. The rite of circumambulation is most ancient. It is the rite of purification of him who is about to be initiated. The direction taken is to comply with the ancient saying, if you would do reverence to the gods, you must turn on the right hand. Masonically, there is additional significance. The right is the stronger side of man. It symbolizes the physical side of nature, also universal law. Jachin. Thus, in reverencing the gods, the right hand and the right side are kept towards the altar. This custom in turn has its origin in ancient solar worship and exemplifies, as the sun in his course moves round the world by way of the south, so do I follow that luminary to obtain the benefit arising from a journey round the earth by way of the south. Rabbinical commentaries on the scripture quoted Ecclesiastes 12:1-7, during the preambulation are of interest to all Masons. A literal translation from the Hebrew by Isaac Leeser better lends itself to this explanation. It is therefore quoted in full. But remember also thy Creator in the days of thy youth, vigor, while the evil days are not yet come, nor those years draw nigh, of which thou wilt say, I have no pleasure in them, while the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are not yet darkened, and the clouds not return again after the rain, on the day when the watchmen of the house will tremble, and the men of might will bend themselves, and the grinders stand idle because they are become few, and those be darkened that look through the windows, and when the two doors on the streets will be locked, while the sound of the mill becometh dull, and man riseth up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low. Also, when men will be afraid of every elevation and are terrified on every way, and the almond tree will flourish, and the locust will drag itself slowly along, and the desire will gainsay compliance, because man goeth to his eternal house, and the mourners go about the streets, while the silver cord is not yet torn loose, and the golden bowl is not crushed, and the pitcher is not broken at the fountain, and the wheel is not crushed at the cistern, when the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Remember thy Creator. Turn to God in thy youthful vigor, before the calamities enumerated overtook thee. While the evil days are not yet come, wait not until those years draw nigh, when, having no pleasure in life, one waits for but death, when failing sight makes all the luminaries of heaven appear darkened. The watchmen who tremble are likened to the shaken hands of an old man, the men of might who might bend themselves, the legs weakened by age, the grinders, the teeth of those who look through the windows, the dimming eyes, the two doors are the lips, the mill by some is interpreted to be the mouth, but Rashi attributes the reference to the stomach. And man riseth up at the voice of the bird, the voice of the old man rises to shrillness like the voice of a bird. The daughters of song, Rashi interprets to mean, when the song of the singers appeared dull in the ears. Philipson prefers, when the several notes become unintelligible, afraid of every elevation and terrified on every way, the terrors and foreboding of the aged, and the almond tree will flourish, will blossom. Man's head will turn white like the almond tree covered with blossoms. The locust is emblematic of the ease with which the strong man labors, whereas in age activity becomes less and less, as though the locust, otherwise so nimble, had to drag its light weight as a burden. By some Hebrew scholars, the loosening of the silver cord, crushing of the bowl, etc., is a description of the general dissolution of the body. Others suppose the silver cord to be the spinal marrow. The latter has support in occult teachings, where the silver cord is described as the connection between the spiritual and material bodies, which is severed at death. It was discovered the approach of the entered apprentice was material. The approach fellow craft, being cyclical, was necessarily different. Herein it is reiterated that the spiritual combines the other two, for the approach of the Master Mason includes them both. Likewise does that due form in this degree partake of elements of the previous degrees. A study herein of the obligation would be Masonically improper. However, it pertains strictly to those duties assumed towards the order, and because of them, to a brother. What is the length of a cable tow? The answer to the oft-voiced query is contained in the remarks of the master. The cable tow is symbolic of the ties to the fraternity, how far the individual Mason is bound by his obligation beyond the recognized minimum, rests solely with his own conscience. That alone is the determining factor of its length. Some cable tows will scarcely reach out of the lodge room. Some, belonging to those Masons truly imbued with brotherly love, seemingly reach around the world. Attention is directed to the three great lights and the representatives of the three lesser lights. These latter are the sun, moon, and worshipful master, and are thus explained. As the sun rules the day and the moon governs the night, so should the worshipful master rule and govern his lodge with equal regularity and justice. This is an extremely poor analogy. The only thing regular about the sun and moon is their irregularity, for they rise and set at a different time each day. Neither do they, in the sense used here, rule or govern with justice, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good. The three lesser lights are a group of symbols of two distinct meanings. In the ritual, however, these two meanings are confusingly combined into one explanation which lends itself into misinterpretation. The error is caused by comparing the worshipful master to the sun and the moon. Pythagoras was previously quoted as saying, God formed two things in his own image. First, the universe itself, and second, man. We conceive of a macrocosm and a microcosm. The underlying idea is a great lodge, the universe, and a lesser lodge, the human institution. The lesser lights are the master, senior, and junior wardens. This is clearly exemplified in the English lodge, where one light is placed at each officer's station, rather than grouping them as in most American lodges. The candidate is informed that the three inanimate objects, giving no material light, are the great lights. Reference is made to representatives of the lesser lights, but there are no representatives of the greater lights. These are categorically stated to be the Holy Bible, square, and compasses. The search for light is a search for knowledge. It is not light, but enlightenment that is desired. This great illumination that the candidate may obtain by aid of representatives of the three lesser lights, the master and wardens, is that enlightenment to which these three officers may assist him when they themselves are informed in Masonry. Of the two meanings which have been combined, the deeper spiritual lesson intends to teach of the unity of the universe and God. In the Great Lodge, the universe, the lesser three lights are the sun, moon, and stars. By their aid, we are enabled to behold the three great lights of the universe. With the physical eye, we behold the earth. In the seeing thereof, we view God manifested as he, the great light, materialized himself in the world by means of the second great light, the Word or universal law. Thus, in viewing the world, we see also God in law, by which he created it, and actually behold the three greater lights of the universe. In the second degree, the candidate is informed that certain symbology teaches that ours is a progressive science. The progression continues in this degree, and he now observes a further change in these symbols, accepting the material explanation, and provided that was but partial light, he has every right to assume that he has now received all the light, but is informed that such is not the case. He has received only such light as can be conferred in a lodge. In seeking the spiritual explanation illustrated by the square and compasses, the latter, emblematic of the spiritual, are observed elevated above the square, typically of the material, which now serves only as a background for the spiritual. The true significance of the changing positions of these two great lights is thereby revealed. First, the square dominated the compasses. Progress was made, and they were next seen to be intertwined. Finally, in the great exposition of the spiritual, the compasses have came to the fore. They now predominate. Thus is symbolized the subjection of the human that is in man by the divine. By the process of deductive reasoning, it is evident that the position of the square and compasses, as now viewed, is not the logical conclusion of their progression, and that something is missing, lost, in the sense that it has not yet been found. This reasoning is correct. There is another position of the square and compasses, but it will not be found on the altar. It is found on the floor of the lodge, as sometime in the past the blazing star was shorn of one of its points and changed into a five-pointed star. Apparently some ritualist, not familiar with the ancient significance of the six-pointed star, associated it with the 5 points of fellowship, with which it has no connection, and decided it should have 5 points. In my own studies, I have failed to discover a place in Masonic symbology for a 5-pointed star, and while some, few authorities, place it among the Masonic symbols, by so doing they deny its Masonic implication, for in its use they attribute a Christian reference, which immediately detracts from both the antiquity and universality of Freemasonry. The compasses are always open to 60 degrees, and if a cross piece be placed from one to the same distance from the apex on the other, an equilateral triangle is formed. All that can be produced by the same procedure with the square is a right-angled triangle, which is the symbol of the complete man. Envisage the square on the quadrant. If it is progressed 30 degrees, which is 1/12 of a circle and a complete sign of the zodiac, to 60 degrees, then joined by a cross piece, an equilateral triangle is formed. The ancient symbol of deity is an equilateral triangle with an angle pointing downward towards his creation. The perfect man is symbolized by an equilateral triangle with an angle pointing upward towards his creator. Here is the symbol of man, in the image and likeness of the symbol of his creator. When these two triangles are intertwined, they form a 6-pointed star, the shield of David or seal of Solomon, as it is likewise known, which for ages has been the grand symbol of the perfect union of the supreme being with the divine man. This is logically depicted by the blazing star in the center of the floor. It is properly placed in the floor rather than on the altar, for the candidate, having assumed all his obligations, will not again kneel at the altar. In ancient times, the Hebrew priest appeared before the congregation with a tallah, or praying shawl, over his head, which he held uplifted from his face, with both raised hands. His index fingers touched each other, and the thumbs, extended below, likewise touched each other, thereby forming a triangle. The fingers of each hand divided into 2 by 2, forming the Hebrew letter Shin, initial letter of Shaddai, meaning hovering over, and carrying the inference that it was divine presence which was hovering over. In this manner, the priest uttered the threefold benediction, repeating 3 times. May the Lord bless thee and keep thee. May the Lord let his countenance shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. This beautiful benediction suffers through translation. The English word peace does not convey the fullness of the meaning of the Hebrew word shalom, which means completeness of being. A certain sign is given the candidate, who is told to what it alludes. This explanation is certainly consistent with the meanings attributed to signs given him on 2 former occasions under similar circumstances. However, in addition to the rational explanation given, the other 2 signs, as has been recounted, had definitely more recondite applications. The sign in question can have no other interpretation if it is correctly given in the ritual. Further, it is inconsistent with a statement made later, when a certain word is declared lost, and it is inferred the sign likewise is lost. Later in the ceremony, it is stated that in a certain manner, both the substitute word mahabon and sign would be indicated. Subsequently, the allegory narrates that the hands were placed in a described position and offers a logical and quite natural reason for such a position being assumed. This then should logically be the sign, having a double rational meaning, and susceptible of esoteric explanation as well. It is the writer's understanding that the GHS, as used in most American jurisdictions, is unknown in English Masonry, where the sign just discussed answers the purpose. It is highly possible that long usage and carelessness on the part of those using these signs throughout the centuries have corrupted them. Originally, both signs were probably one. That is, the hands were held in the same relation to each other, but in the 2 different positions related to the body. They obviously bore some relationship, which the informed Mason will immediately discern, to the manner in which the Hebrew priests conferred the benediction. Assuming a connection exists, what symbolism is conveyed by the position? The triangle, formed by the thumbs and fingers, symbolizes the spiritual. The letter Shin, formed by the fingers, typifies divine presence hovering over. The position of the hands has immediately been associated with the threefold benediction, bespeaking completeness of being. Therefore, we have illustrated by symbols the truth that the spiritual is completeness of being, which is attained through recognition of divine presence, which is constantly hovering over. Further evidence of the spirituality of this degree is amplified at hand. The biblical character Tubal-Cain is mentioned, but in some rituals, proper emphasis on the esoteric meaning of this name is lacking. Therein, it is merely stated that he was a brother of Jubal, the 8th man from Adam, and the first known artificer in metals. The Bible, however, is more specific. Genesis 4:22, and Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. This may seem to raise a sharp distinction, but if we are to understand the meaning of ancient symbols, sharp distinctions must be the rule rather than the exception. It is not sufficiently enlightening to know he worked in metals. The specific metals must be known. Later on is discussed the meaning of Haramabith as cunning in all works of brass. The exact symbology applies in this instance, in addition to which we are informed Tubal-Cain was likewise proficient in iron. The reference to iron is better understood by referring to the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception by Max Heidel. Iron is in reality the basis of separate existence. Without iron, the red, heat-giving blood would be an impossibility, and the ego could have no hold in the body. When red blood developed in the latter part of the Lemurian epoch, the body became upright, and the time had come when the ego could begin to dwell within the body and control it. Hence, it is apparent that iron symbolizes the physical, That Tubal Cain was an instructor of every artificer implies greater skill and knowledge than that of a mere artificer. Recognizing this emphatic distinction, we discern that Tubal Cain was a highly skilled worker on both the spiritual and the material plane, capable of instructing others. The lofty aim of the Master Mason is to attain like proficiency. Hence, Tubal Cain may well be held up as a fitting reminder to the Master Mason of his goal. The manner of wearing the apron in the preceding degrees is recapitulated. A certain manner is both described and demonstrated, and the candidate is then informed that it is obsolete because of certain reasons, and that the apron should be worn as a fellow craft. An apron folded diagonally not only does not form a square, as stated in several jurisdictions in America, but loses all resemblance thereto. It becomes a triangle. It is the emblem of the spiritual and concurs in the symbology of the compasses elevated above the square, for the sake of consistency. In view of the fact that the apron and the square and the compasses have repeated the same progressing symbology thus far, it may be asked if a further change in the apron is indicated. It is impossible to fold an apron evenly into an equilateral triangle. It therefore will not change to concur with the symbology of the six-pointed star. The apron is worn by the evolving man up to and including this attainment of completeness. But the apron is a material thing, regardless of what it may symbolize. Obviously, it cannot be worn by the perfected man who is a spiritual being. Hence, logically, the progression of the apron ceases. The working tools of the Master Mason are all the implements of masonry indiscriminately, especially the trowel. A survey of all the implements reveals but 6. This is inconsistent with the numerology of the lodge. It is symbolically necessary they total 7, and if the sitting maul is included, the total is 7. Masonically, it is regarded as an instrument of violence. For that reason, it possibly was removed from the working tools by some early ritualist who did not realize its symbolical significance. It should be reinstated for the same logical reasons which suggest it was originally included. Anyone who has watched a bricklayer at work has noticed how he uses the handle of his trowel to tap the block into proper position. A stonemason performs the same task with a sitting maul, as a stone is too massive to respond to the taps of a trowel handle. Thus, the sitting maul is an essential tool of the operative mason. The tools of the apprentice are preparatory tools. Those of the fellow craft, strictly speaking, are not tools. They are instruments with which to measure, to bring into manifestation in the material building these concepts formed in the mind of the architect of plumb uprights, level footings, and square joinings. Again, it is repeated and emphasized that the spiritual encompasses the other 2 planes of existence. They are necessary to it, yet it extends away and beyond the material and cyclical. For in addition to employing the tools of the other planes, it has tools peculiar to its own plane. True, brotherly love is a spiritual attribute, and it is only the trowel which can spread the cement of brotherly love and affection. The other implements of masonry are all right angles, horizontals, and perpendiculars. The trowel cannot be so described, for its point forms an acute angle. While operative trowels are varied in shape to adapt themselves to different purposes, the symbolic trowel of masonry should be made with an angle of 60 degrees, wherein is discovered an equilateral triangle. Thus it is discovered the Working tools, peculiar to the Master Mason, is the emblem of the spiritual. This is to demonstrate that, as an overseer of the work, he must be proficient in the use of all the implements indiscriminately. Else he could not supervise others, but he must progress beyond the ability of those under his direction. He must also, and especially, work spiritually. The symbology of the trowel points to further evidence favoring the inclusion of the sitting maul, with its rounded base and sides tapering up to the handle. It discloses 60-degree angles and, coinciding with the trowel, diverges from those tools described as right angles, horizontals, and perpendiculars. Ready at hand, too, is an ethical lesson. A sitting maul is an instrument made use of by operative masons to coerce the unwieldy stone into its proper position in the building. But we, as free and accepted masons, are taught to make use of it for the more noble and glorious purpose of implementing ourselves into our proper positions in the building of which we are to form a part. A more recondite explanation is seen in the constructive and destructive actions of universal law. In the hands of the ignorant and unskilled workmen, it becomes an instrument of death and destruction, but in the hands of the enlightened and skillful craftsmen, it becomes a constructive instrument with which the recalcitrant stone is forced into its proper position. The proficiency examination of this degree is practically a recapitulation of the ceremony of initiation, and only 2 questions and answers shed any further light on the esoteric doctrine. Of all the material creation man alone can desire, I am. But those words are far more than a declaration of a material fact. To so declare is recognition of consciousness, a statement of recognized individuality, an affirmation of divinity. For only God and man, made in his image, can declare, I am. Not in the mere statement, but rather in the complete realization of its implications, is the power we seek, for it is an affirmation of immortality. There is more than one kind of foreign country. To reach those shown on the map, one must transport the physical body. But those foreign countries of the mental realm may be instantly reached by the mind. Those foreign countries are fields of thought, foreign to our present mode of thinking. And when we travel in them, we receive master's wages and the bountiful rewards such thinking brings into our lives. The entire object of Freemasonry is to inculcate such thinking, for when followed to its logical conclusion, it is discovered that Freemasonry is not a lodge, not a ritual, but a plan for the living of a life. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.